They thought they'd won. My mother-in-law had fake evidence, a lawyer, and a plan to take my baby. But what she didn't know was that while she was celebrating her victory over lunch with champagne, I was in a lawyer's office building a case that would destroy everything they'd built in 3 generations. At their precious charity gala, in front of 300 of the city's elite, I didn't just expose their plan to frame me, I revealed secrets that sent my mother-in-law to prison. By the time I walked off that stage, the Hartwell family name was dirt. And honestly, it was the most satisfying moment of my entire life. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. I had exactly 3 weeks between Patricia's ultimatum at that restaurant and the annual Hartwell Family Foundation Charity Gala. 3 weeks to gather evidence that would stand up in court and in the court of public opinion. 3 weeks to pretend I was broken while secretly preparing for war. And let me tell you, those were the longest and hardest 3 weeks of my life. The day after that lunch with Patricia and her lawyer, I called Michael Chen. He's a family lawyer who specializes in cases like mine, custody battles against wealthy families who think their money makes them above the law. I'd found him through a support group for mothers dealing with false CPS reports, and his reviews were incredible. When I walked into his office with Oliver in my arms and broke down telling him everything, he didn't look surprised. He looked angry. "Sophie, what they're doing is illegal on multiple levels," he said, taking notes as I spoke. "The fake CPS reports, the secret recordings, especially if they recorded you without consent in places where you had a reasonable expectation of privacy, like your bathroom. The manipulation of evidence. But here's the thing, the Hartwell name carries weight in the city. We need ironclad proof, and we need to be strategic about how we use it." That's when he introduced me to Dana Rodriguez, a private investigator who used to be a police detective. Dana was in her late 30s, sharp as a knife, and she looked at me with this understanding that made me want to cry. "I've seen families like the Hartwells before," she said. "They think money and status make them untouchable. Let's prove them wrong." So while I was playing the role of defeated daughter-in-law at family dinners, Dana was digging into every corner of the Hartwell family's life. And Michael was preparing legal strategies for every possible outcome. The hardest part was pretending. God, the pretending nearly broke me. I had to go to Sunday dinners at the Hartwell estate and let Patricia and Rachel gloat. Patricia would pat my hand and say things like, "You're looking better, dear. Are you considering what we discussed?" with the sickly sweet smile that made my skin crawl. Rachel would smirk at me over her wine glass and find excuses to touch James, to whisper in his ear, to remind me that she was circling my husband like a vulture. James was pulling further and further away from me. His mother was in his ear constantly, and he'd started suggesting we take a break so I could work on myself. He'd even mentioned that maybe Oliver should stay with his parents for a few days each week to give me time to rest and get help. Every suggestion felt like a knife in my chest, but I smiled. I nodded. I pretended to consider it. Because I knew what they didn't, that every conversation was being recorded on the device Michael had given me, legally, with his guidance on how to use it properly. Within the first week, Dana came back with preliminary findings that made my blood boil. She'd traced the anonymous CPS calls to burner phones, and she'd found security camera footage from the stores where those phones were purchased. In one video, you could clearly see Patricia's distinctive silver Mercedes in the parking lot. In another, Rachel's red BMW. The timestamps matched the purchase times perfectly. They weren't even careful, Dana said, spreading the evidence across Michael's conference table. They thought the burner phones would be enough. They didn't think about security cameras, about patterns, about digital footprints. But that was just the beginning. Dana had also discovered that Patricia wasn't very tech-savvy. She used the same password for everything Hartwell 1965, her married name and birth year. Through legal discovery processes that Michael initiated, we gained access to Patricia's cloud storage. What we found there made me physically ill. There were dozens of videos of me. Footage from my worst postpartum moments, crying on the bathroom floor, struggling to calm Oliver when he wouldn't stop screaming, having moments of frustration and exhaustion that every new mother experiences. Raw, vulnerable, human moments that should have stayed private. But in a separate folder labeled Evidence, Patricia had edited versions. She'd cut and spliced the footage to make me look incoherent, unstable, dangerous. She'd taken audio of me saying things like "I can't do this anymore" during a particularly hard night, words every exhausted parent has said, and removed all context to make it sound like I was threatening to hurt myself or Oliver. I sat in Michael's office watching those videos and I sobbed. Not just because of the betrayal, but because those were real moments of struggle. Those were times when I'd needed support, needed compassion, needed someone to tell me I was doing okay and that being tired didn't make me a bad mother. Instead, Patricia had turned my humanity into a weapon. "This is actually good for us," Michael said gently, handing me tissues. "We have the raw footage and the edited versions. We can show exactly how she manipulated evidence. A jury would be sympathetic to you, Sophie. Any mother would understand what you were going through." Dana wasn't done digging though. She'd noticed something odd in the Hartwell Family Foundation's public tax filings, the ones that charities have to file every year. The numbers didn't add up. Administrative costs were unusually high. There were consulting fees to companies Dana couldn't verify actually existed. Large amounts marked as event expenses that seemed inflated. "I have a friend who's a forensic accountant," Dana said. "Former colleague from my police days. Can I bring him in?" I agreed immediately, and that's when everything changed. Within a week, Dana's forensic accountant friend had uncovered a massive fraud scheme. Patricia had been embezzling from the foundation for 6 years since she'd taken over as director after James's father had semi-retired. She'd created fake consulting companies, inflated event costs, and submitted fraudulent grant applications. She'd even used the foundation's credit card for personal expenses and disguised them as donor relations or fundraising costs. The total? $387,000. Money that was supposed to help underprivileged children access education and healthcare. Money meant for families struggling to make ends meet. Patricia had stolen it to fund her lifestyle: designer clothes, luxury vacations, jewelry that cost more than most people made in a year. I stared at the spreadsheets Dana had laid out, feeling rage build in my chest like a physical force. This woman who had spent 2 years telling me I wasn't good enough, wasn't sophisticated enough, didn't come from the right background. She was a thief. She was stealing from children, from sick kids and struggling families. While Patricia was preaching about family values and protecting the vulnerable, she was robbing them blind. The hypocrisy was so thick I could choke on it. But Dana still wasn't finished. She'd also been monitoring Rachel's digital footprint, and what she found was almost worse than the embezzlement, because it was so personal, so deliberately cruel. Rachel had been texting her best friend Madison for months about the plan. And because Rachel was careless and arrogant, she'd never deleted anything. Dana showed me screenshots that made me want to throw up. "Sophie is so pathetic. Mom's plan is working perfectly. Once we prove she's unstable, James will finally see I'm the one who should have been with him. I've been accidentally touching James more. He's definitely noticing. Once Sophie is out of the picture and he sees how much better I am for him. OMG, Mom got such good footage today." Sophie was literally crying on the bathroom floor because Oliver wouldn't stop screaming. "We edited it to make her look insane. This is going to work so well in court." There were Instagram DMs too, and voice notes where Rachel and Madison laughed about my situation like it was entertainment. In one voice note, Rachel said she actually thanked Mom for her concern. "God, she's so dumb. She has no idea we're building a court case against her." I sat there listening to my sister-in-law mock my pain, listening to her laugh about trying to seduce my husband, and something crystallized inside me. This wasn't just about protecting Oliver anymore. This was about making sure these people faced consequences for what they'd done. The final 2 weeks before the gala were a blur of preparation. Michael compiled everything into a devastating presentation: audio recordings, text messages, the comparison of raw versus edited footage, financial documents showing the embezzlement, proof of the fake CPS reports. We had timestamps, paper trails, witnesses, everything. He also prepared legal documents to be filed immediately after the gala: divorce papers for James, restraining orders against Patricia and Rachel, a formal complaint to the district attorney's office about the embezzlement, and a complaint to CPS about the false reports. "We're not just exposing them," Michael explained. "We're making sure there are legal consequences. The exposure is satisfying, but the justice comes from the system holding them accountable." I also had to prepare myself mentally for what I was about to do. Standing up in front of 300 people, the city's elite, the people who'd looked down on me for 2 years, and accusing one of their own of crimes? It was terrifying. I practiced my speech over and over. In the shower, while feeding Oliver, late at night when I couldn't sleep. I had to get it perfect because there would be no second chances. The night before the gala, I barely slept. I kept running through everything in my mind. What if the AV equipment failed? What if the crowd turned on me instead of Patricia? What if I froze up there and couldn't speak? What if they closed ranks around the Hartwell name and I ended up looking like a vindictive, crazy woman? But then I'd look at Oliver sleeping in his crib, so innocent and perfect, and I'd remember why I was doing this. I was doing it so he'd never grow up thinking it was okay to treat people the way the Hartwells had treated me. I was doing it so he'd know his mother fought for him. I was doing it because someone had to stand up to people who thought their money made them above basic human decency. The day of the gala arrived. I dropped Oliver off with my parents, who were on standby for when everything went down. My mom hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You're so brave, sweetheart," she whispered. "We're so proud of you. No matter what happens tonight, you're already won by refusing to let them break you." I got ready carefully. I chose a beautiful dress, not designer, and I made sure it looked elegant but clearly not from their world. I wanted to look put together but not like I was trying to be someone I wasn't. My hair and makeup were simple and classic. I wanted to look like myself, like the woman they'd tried to destroy, standing tall. Driving to the venue, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. The gala was being held at this historic estate outside the city massive grounds, a ballroom with crystal chandeliers, manicured gardens. The kind of place where the Hartwells belonged, and I never would. I arrived right on time, not early enough to seem eager, not late enough to draw attention. Walking into that ballroom felt like walking into a lion's den. There were 300 guests, everyone who mattered in this city's social hierarchy. Politicians, business leaders, old money families, foundation donors. The string quartet was playing softly. Waiters circulated with champagne and expensive hors d'oeuvres. And there was Patricia, holding court near the center of the room. She wore a stunning gown that probably cost more than my car, and jewelry that I now knew was purchased with stolen money. She was laughing with the mayor's wife, surrounded by admirers, looking every inch the beloved philanthropist and society matron. James was across the room networking with some business associates, looking handsome and confident in his tuxedo. He'd barely spoken to me in the past week except to suggest again that maybe I should skip the gala if I was feeling overwhelmed. And Rachel. God, Rachel looked stunning in a designer dress that hugged every curve. She was standing with James, her hand on his arm in that possessive way she had, leaning close to whisper something in his ear. When she saw me enter, she smirked. Actually smirked at me, like she'd already won. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around and leave. But I thought about Oliver. I thought about every mother who'd been gaslit and manipulated. I thought about the families Patricia had stolen from. And I walked further into that ballroom with my head held high. I found my assigned seat at a table in the back, of course, as far from the family as possible. Patricia's subtle way of putting me in my place. I sat through cocktail hour making small talk with strangers who clearly knew I was the Hartwell daughter-in-law and were judging whether I measured up. Dinner was served multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. I barely tasted any of it. My stomach was in knots, my heart racing so fast I thought people at my table could hear it. I checked my phone under the table. Michael had texted, "Everything is loaded and ready. The AV tech is in position. You've got this, Sophie." Patricia's speech was scheduled for 8:30, right after dessert. I watched the clock like it was counting down to an execution. Maybe it was the execution of the Hartwell family's perfect reputation. Finally, dessert was cleared. The lights dimmed slightly. Patricia stood and made her way to the stage to enthusiastic applause. She looked so confident, so beloved, so untouchable. She took the microphone and smiled at the crowd like a queen surveying her kingdom. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight to support the Hartwell Family Foundation and our mission to help the most vulnerable members of our community, our children." I felt ball rise in my throat. She talked about protecting children while she'd tried to steal mine, while she'd stolen from theirs. Patricia continued her speech, discussing the foundation's work, thanking donors, talking about family values and responsibility and doing the right thing even when it's difficult. Every word was poison wrapped in silk. The room hung on her every word, nodding along, clearly moved by her eloquence. She was winding down, about to introduce the evening's entertainment, when I stood up. The movement caught attention. Heads turned. Patricia's smile faltered for just a second when she saw me walking toward the stage. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying further than I expected. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something everyone in this room needs to hear before this evening continues. Patricia's face went pale, then flushed red. Sophie, this isn't the time or place. We're in the middle of I know exactly what we're in the middle of, I said, climbing the stage steps. My legs felt like water but I kept moving. A foundation event about protecting vulnerable families and children, which is deeply ironic, considering what you've been doing to me and my son. The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. James was on his feet at his table, looking alarmed. Rachel's face was frozen in horror. Board members were glancing at each other in confusion. I took the microphone from Patricia's hand. She was too shocked to resist. My name is Sophie Hartwell. I'm married to James Hartwell and I'm the mother of his 6-month-old son, Oliver. For the past year, my mother-in-law Patricia and my sister-in-law Rachel have been systematically trying to destroy me and steal my child. They've made false reports to Child Protective Services. They've secretly recorded me during my most vulnerable postpartum moments and edited the footage to make me appear mentally ill. They've manipulated my husband against me. And they've been planning to use fabricated evidence to take my baby in court. The room erupted in shocked whispers. I signaled the AV technician Michael had coordinated with. The screens around the ballroom which had been showing foundation promotional materials suddenly changed. Audio filled the room. Patricia's voice, clear as day. The second CPS report should come in next week. I made sure to include specific details about the apartment. They'll have to investigate again. Rachel's voice, do you really think this will work? Patricia's voice, of course it will. Multiple reports create a pattern. Combined with the footage, no judge will leave that baby with her. The gasps were audible now. Board members looked horrified. The mayor's wife had her hand over her mouth. James was staring at the screen like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. I let the recording play for another moment, then continued. That's my mother-in-law and sister-in-law discussing their plan to frame me as an unfit mother. Now let me show you what they did with the footage Patricia secretly recorded. The screen split. On the left side, raw footage of me having a completely normal postpartum moment, exhausted, crying from lack of sleep, but clearly coherent and sane. On the right side, Patricia's edited version of the same footage, sliced and manipulated to make me look incoherent and unstable. This, I said, pointing to the raw footage, is what normal motherhood looks like. Exhausting, emotional, human. And this, I pointed to the edited version, is what Patricia created to try to prove I was mentally ill. She secretly recorded me in my own bathroom, during my lowest moments, and turned my humanity into a weapon to steal my child. Patricia tried to speak. This is exactly the kind of unstable behavior we've been concerned about. I'm not finished, I said coldly. The screens changed again, showing Rachel's text messages to Madison. The messages about seducing James, about enjoying my suffering, about the plan to frame me. Voice notes of Rachel and Madison laughing about it played through the speakers. Rachel actually ran from the ballroom, sobbing. Madison, who was sitting at a table near the front, looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. But I still wasn't done. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Now let me tell you what Patricia has really been doing with your donations, I said, and pulled up the financial documents. Spreadsheets showing the embezzlement, fake consulting companies, inflated costs, stolen money. While Patricia has been standing on this stage year after year telling you about helping vulnerable children, she's been stealing from them. $387,000 over 6 years. Money that was supposed to help sick kids and struggling families spent on her vacations, her jewelry, her designer clothes. The board president stood up, his face purple with rage. The mayor's wife looked like she might be sick. Donors were furiously whispering to each other. Several people had their phones out, recording everything. Patricia's mouth opened and closed but no sound came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. All her composure, all her confidence, all her power gone in an instant. I turned back to the crowd. The Hartwell family tried to teach me that reputation is everything in your world. So here's theirs destroyed. My lawyer has filed complaints with the district attorney's office, with Child Protective Services, and with the police. Patricia Hartwell is a thief and a fraud who tried to steal my child. And everyone in this room now knows it. I set the microphone down and walked off that stage with my head held high. The ballroom erupted into chaos behind me, board members surrounding Patricia, donors demanding answers, journalists taking notes. But I didn't look back. I walked straight out of that ballroom, got in my car, and drove to my parents' house to hold my son. 6 months later, Patricia was convicted and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Rachel moved to another state to escape the scandal. James and I divorced, and I got full custody with him getting supervised visitation. The Hartwell name became synonymous with fraud and scandal in our city. And me? I'm free. Oliver and I are building a life without them, surrounded by people who actually love and support us. I'm thriving. My business is growing. I'm even dating someone new who treats me like I deserve to be treated. They thought they could destroy me because I was young and poor and didn't come from their world. Instead, I destroyed everything they'd built in 3 generations. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. If you're dealing with toxic in-laws or family members who gaslight and manipulate you, remember this: document everything, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you you're crazy when you know the truth. You're stronger than you think. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply making sure everyone knows the truth. If this story gave you that sweet justice feeling, please hit that subscribe button and smash the like button for Revenge with Irene. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members. Your stories matter, and I read every single comment. Thanks for watching, and remember, whispers can turn into roars. I'll see you in the next one.